Hi, I'm Ben Wojdyla from Popular Mechanics, and today on Saturday Mechanic, in part 2 of basic maintenance, we're going to change the oil on this car. We're also going to take a look at the undercarriage to see if we find anything. Since we're already under the car, we're going to take a look around. It's always best to poke around the car just to see if there's anything wrong. So we're going to start at the back. This is an all-wheel drive car, so it's got a differential back here. We're going to look at this and see if there's any leaks, and this one looks like there's a little grease on it, so it might be a leak in the future that we'll have to keep an eye on. We're also going to look at the brake lines. These hard lines aren't pinched, and there's no leaks, no water. These flexible ones, make sure they're flexible and there's no cracks in them. We're good on this side, and I don't see any dents or nicks up in here. This rubber, the side on the other one is good. Brake lines for the emergency brake look good. You also want to just grab onto the hard parts and make sure nothing's rattling around. Okay, so as we move up to the muffler, looks like we've got a little bit of rust here, but there isn't any holes in it, and I'm not hearing any exhaust sound when I'm driving it, so it's probably fine for now. Just keep an eye on it. While we move forward, we've got our fuel lines on this side. Just like with the brakes, we're going to look at our rubber fittings and make sure that they're still flexible, and make sure that all the hard lines they're dry, there's no leaks in them, and there's no dents or nicks. It looks good on this side. As we go forward, we got our brake lines on this side, and the same thing. We're going to check for any leakage, any moisture, any dents, and it looks fine up in here. As we get forward to the front, we're going to start looking for any kind of leaks of oil or coolant or brake fluid. And I'm not seeing a heck of a lot up here. It looks like we're fairly well dry, which is good. You're going to want to inspect as well the CV boots. Here we've got four sets on this car since it's all-wheel drive. So you're going to look for any tears or grease streaks on the car. You'll see it in the wheel well or on the outside of these things. And these are still pretty flexible, and there's no grease on it at all, so those are good. We're also going to keep poking around looking for any leaks on this one. Look up in here, use your service light so you can see all the nooks and crannies, and we're looking pretty good on this one. Now's a good chance to clean it off too if you get the urge, if you're a neat freak. All right, so we're going to check the tie rods too. The way you're going to do that is put one hand on one side and one on the other. Push here, pull here, and back and forth. You're just wiggling the tire back and forth. What you're looking for is any kind of over loose connections up here. You can jiggle it back and forth too. If it plays a lot, if it moves back and forth, you could have a problem with a tie rod end or a ball joint somewhere in the suspension. So this one seems fine. We'll check the other side, and it looks fine. When you're doing your walk around, you're going to want to pay close attention to your tires. They are the best window into the health of your suspension. This tire in particular caught our attention because it's got uneven wear on it. If you look on this side, the tread is pretty well defined, but as you work your way across, it's getting a little bare on this side. That tells us there's something not quite right about the suspension. It could be the alignment, could be a bad shock. The alignment's off somehow. We're also going to look at these wear bars up here. The tires are designed with these in them so that when the tread depth gets low and it's time to replace them, they'll be flush with the surface of the tire. This one's pretty close, so we're going to need to replace these tires too. We may deal with that in a future segment. As part of our regular maintenance, we're going to do an oil change on this car. Doesn't take much for tools. I've got my overalls and my safety glasses, but you're also going to need a filter wrench that takes the filter off. You're going to need a regular wrench for the drain plug, a torque wrench to put the drain plug back on with the right tightness, and you're going to need a couple of parts too. You're going to need a new filter, and you're going to need new crush washers, which go on the drain plug and act as a seal. I've also got a pad of paper here, so I've got a good list of things I can look at while I'm under the car and jot down anything I might need to along the way. You're going to want a catch pan first of all. This is a good one. It's got a telescoping end, so if your car's up on a lift, you need one of these, but otherwise you'll just need a drain pan on the ground. Most of the time when these filters are put in, they should be either hand tight or just a little bit more than hand tight. If you can't get it off by hand, you use the wrench, but we'll see if we can get this one off just by twisting. and it'll come right off. And there comes our oil. So you're going to want to make sure that you let all of this drain out. Turn the filter upside down and let that drain right there. Next step is going to be to take the plug out, and it's right here on the side. Make sure to use a box end wrench so that you don't strip out the bolt head. So that should come off. When you're changing the oil, you want to make sure that the oil temperature is warm but not hot, so the oil flows well, but you don't burn yourself. Also, be careful and hang on to this bolt, because if you lose it in the pan, it's a pain in the butt to get out. All right, so we're just going to let that drain. Let it drain completely. You're going to be here for a couple of minutes letting that go. Oil shops will tell you to change your oil every 3,000 miles. Don't listen to that. It's probably way too often. It's best to watch your oil life monitor, which a lot of new cars are coming with. Either that or just change it based on what the owner's manual tells you. Well, it's just about finished draining, so we're going to start on the replacement phase. First thing I want to do is clean off the sealing surfaces for the filter. Just right up here. Make sure you got all the gunk and burnt oil and filth off of it so that when we put the filter back on, it seals up real nice. Should just about do it. It's going to keep dripping down there, so let it drip. Another thing that comes out of washing that surface is you want to make sure that this O-ring on the front of the filter isn't stuck on there. If you end up with two O-rings on there, it's going to leak. So not only do you clean the gunk off, you want to make sure to clean the filter O-ring off. All right, so we're going to replace our drain plug now. These things have a washer on the inside that's not just a washer, it's actually part of the seal. For the most part, you can just use those over and over again. But when you've taken this thing off and you see that it's dripping out of here, it's probably a good time to get a new washer, new crush washer, like this one. It's easy to get, they're only a couple bucks, and it'll seal the bottom of your car up. This one, you'd normally take it off, slide it over the top like that. So we don't need to do that on this car. We're just going to put this right back in place. When you're doing this, you're going to want to make sure to hand tighten it first. If you use a tool, a power tool or a wrench on this, you could cross thread it, and that would be a bad day. So since we've got it hand tight, now we're going to grab our torque wrench, put that on there, tighten it down to spec. This one is a 31 foot-pound spec, so we're going to tighten that one up to there. Next, we're going to put the oil filter on. Before we do that, we're actually going to fill it with oil as much as we can. On this car, the oil filter lies on its side, so I can't fill it all the way up, but I can get some in there. And the reason for that is, when I start the car up the first time after this change, it won't have any oil pressure until this filter is full. So by filling this partly with oil, we're going to accelerate that process. So I'm going to fill this up a little bit. About halfway. We're also going to take a little bit of this oil here and dab it onto this O-ring. This will improve the seal when we put it on. So just like that, we're going to put this on now. Just like with the plug, you want to make sure to only use your hands on this one to tighten it up. And then once that seal touches, you're going to want to turn it about a quarter to a 3/4 of a turn. And it just touched, so I'm going to turn it again, and we're set. With that, we'll lower the car and fill it up with oil. Since we've got everything underneath buttoned up, a new filter and the plug back in, got to make sure those are both in before you start adding oil, but that's what we're going to do next. Oil is a little bit of a tricky subject. The best thing you can do is consult your owner's manual for weight and type, whether you want a 0W40 or a 5W30. That's what your owner's manual is going to tell you. You also want to know whether your vehicle requires synthetic or au natural. So we're going to add that next. Start by taking the filler cap out. It's good to have a funnel in hand too. Makes aiming a little bit easier, especially when you've got the big jug like we've got here. So we're gonna very carefully add that in. This car takes about 5.3 quarts, which is more than your average automobile. Most take about 4 quarts. As you're filling, you want to fill until you get close, and then start checking with the dipstick. The last thing you want to do is overfill, then you got to let oil out, so you're back through the whole process again. All right, so we're getting close, and I'm going to start checking with the dipstick. All right, we're about halfway there, so we're going to keep adding. Just a little bit at this point. Finish off this jug and then check it again. You want to try not to drip oil off the front of the engine or out of this hole. It'll almost always end up on something hot and make your engine stink while it's running. All right, so that's 5.1 in, and we'll check it again. All right, that looks pretty darn close. At this point, what we can do is run the engine to get the oil to all the places it needs to be. Then we'll check it one last time and fill if we need to. All right, that's it for the oil change and checking the undercarriage. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the section below. We might get in contact with you.